I want to tell you this morning about my cousin Peter, who lives in an area where many experience homelessness. Peter's not an expert on social housing. He doesn't have funding to start a big project. But Peter follows Jesus. He got an idea. When he saw a homeless person, he stopped to chat. He walked with them to the laundrette and he paid for their clothes and their bedding to be washed and dried, chatting all the time. Word spread. Groups of homeless people would meet him at the laundrette. His church heard about it. Some of them collected coins to fit the machine slots. Others joined him at the laundrette to sit and chat to people they wouldn't normally feel comfortable speaking to. A practical need was met and an opportunity to connect with people was created. I can only imagine the conversations that have taken place in that laundrette over piles of smelly washing. Peter's faith in action took him to the laundrette. I wonder where following Jesus takes you. Has it taken you to people or places that you're not altogether comfortable with? This is the last in our series called Faithful. If you missed it, you can catch up on YouTube, and we're exploring how to fuel our faith in a world that lives on empty. Christian faith starts with an invitation from Jesus to follow him. A Christian is simply a Jesus follower, someone who intentionally follows where Jesus is leading. It's a simple invitation to follow. And it makes for an exciting, not necessarily predictable life if you actively and intentionally follow Jesus and see what happens. Maybe you're still considering it today and wondering what it would mean for you. You might be surprised where following Jesus would take you. Well, so far we've explored two key ways to fuel our faith and help us follow Jesus. And the first is intentional community, finding other Jesus followers with whom you can be open and honest so you can challenge and encourage one another. A best mate, a small group that you can journey with. The second way to grow is through private disciplines, getting to know Jesus by reading your Bible, carving out time to pray and be silent, fasting and giving generously. So following Jesus is a personal thing, it's a heart thing, and it involves being in Christian community. Doing both those things will grow our faith. But so far, we're in a holy huddle. We're secluded from normal life. And Jesus didn't live like that. He didn't separate himself from society. And if we're serious about following him, then we have to put our faith into action. We have to live it out. And a key sign of change on the inside is how it impacts what we do and how we live. Living out our beliefs and values is a sign of true faith, and it will help our faith to grow. At the start of their journey, Jesus invited his disciples to follow him and spend time with him as a group, but he also invited them to do. Now, so there's a tension here of being and doing. Have you found that? Some of us find being comes naturally. Others find it easier to do. And we need to hold them in balance because we need both. We can be active and effective in our faith if we've invested time in private disciplines, if we've spent time with Jesus. Working for him and with him grows naturally out of resting in him. So if we do these three things, intentional community, private disciplines, and active faith, it will result in full faith and a full life. So let's explore what active faith involves. One of Jesus' followers, Matthew, told a story in chapter 14 of his book, which is a great example of Jesus putting his disciples in a place that stretched their faith. The story starts with Jesus heading off to a solitary place to be alone, to pray. Jesus fueled his own faith with those private disciplines, and Jesus intentionally spent time with his small band of friends. They followed him there. And then the crowds turned up, interrupting their precious retreat time. I would have been utterly frustrated. But instead of showing frustration, Jesus felt compassion. He saw their need. He saw the disease. he saw their pain and their hurt. He used his supernatural powers to heal their sick, not en masse, but one after another. A blend of compassion and divine power. There must have been a real buzz. What a joy. But it was getting late and the place was remote. The disciples did what you and I would have done. They told Jesus to send the crowds away so that they could buy food in the villages. The disciples had had enough. But Jesus saw an opportunity. The crowds weren't starving. They could have headed home. But it was an opportunity to fuel the disciples' faith. Jesus replied, "You give them something to eat. You see the need. You do it." And he says that to you and to me today. You see the needs around you. You give them what they need. What's the unspoken truth here? The unspoken truth is that God will enable you to meet those needs. Well, I wonder how you and I would have responded. Feeding a huge crowd would be an enormous logistical effort, never mind all the cleaning up. It would take hours, and it's late. There's only 5 loaves and 2 fish. They don't have the resources, and they're tired. And it'll be embarrassing if they get everyone sitting down, expectant, and God doesn't show up, or there isn't enough to go round. Why involve them at all? Jesus has been healing the sick miraculously. Can't he just power on and get this done too without involving them? The disciples had a choice. They believed Jesus could do amazing things, but they questioned whether he could meet people's needs through them. When they passed the food around, would it be enough? Or will they look stupid? They wouldn't know unless they tried it, unless they took a step of faith. Well, the disciples didn't sneak off. They followed Jesus. And one by one, they took food from Jesus' hands and they passed it out among the crowds. It's interesting to me that Jesus didn't create a whole pile of food for them to see before they handed it out. It was as they worked that the miracle happened. The food multiplied in their hands, and everyone ate until they were full, and there were thousands of them there. The final job was to pick up the leftovers, 12 basketfuls. Jesus met the people's needs through the disciples' willingness to get involved. They put their faith into action. They must have been exhausted, but their faith was fueled. They were pumped. They would never forget the day God showed up and they got to help. The disciples had spent lots of time in Jesus' company, that private discipline, and in community as a group building their faith. And so they were ready to put their faith into action. And their faith grew as a result. Jesus was preparing them for the time when he wouldn't be there with them anymore. They would carry on his work on earth. Amazing as it sounds, God chose to continue his supernatural work through ordinary people, empowered by his Holy Spirit after Jesus left them. And he still has the same plan. You and I receive from Jesus in faith, truth and love and grace, and we pass that on to other people. When you and I step out in faith to meet a need or do something new, relying on God to help us, we grow. When we put ourselves in a position that's beyond our comfort zone, trusting God to stretch our time and meet that need as well as our other responsibilities, we grow. You may be worried about a lack of resources or knowledge or skills. The disciples were. When we trust God to multiply our resources or equip us with skills we don't naturally have, our faith grows. When we see God at work in us and through us, blessing others despite our weakness, it's a welcome surprise and we grow. Having private disciplines in place helps us to live our faith out. If we're used to listening to Jesus, if we know his character from our Bible reading, we're more likely to be able to see where Jesus is leading and hear that God prod. Stepping out in faith also forces me to pray more. I know I can't do it on my own. I need help. And I realize my dependence on God to show up. Intentional community helps us develop an active faith. I so value having people around me, you guys, who will challenge me every so often to look beyond my own little world and encourage me to leave my comfort zone. And then when my faith is being stretched and it feels a bit beyond me, I seek out people to pray with me and for me. It increases my desire for community because I realize I need that support and encouragement. So those three things interlink. They go together to help us grow our faith. Stepping out in faith is scary. The disciples risked failure when they walked out with 5 loaves and 2 fish. I wonder if anyone laughed in the crowd. My cousin had no experience with homeless people. What would he talk about? You and I can't be sure how God will enable us to meet a need until we try it. We worry about the lack of resources. We worry about the effects on our family if we get tired or busy. We worry that we won't know what to say or how to act. But mostly, we're afraid that we'll take a risk and God won't show up. I don't know if you've been in the church storage area. When I first went to get something from there, I stopped at the door because it's pitch black in there. I couldn't see any light switch. I put a toe over the threshold. Nothing. I was afraid to trip over something, so I went to get Chris. I said, "What's happened to the lights?" He walked straight into the darkness, confident that after the first step, the lights would come on automatically. I had been too afraid to take that first step into the darkness. Putting our faith into practice can feel like that. Stepping up to help meet a need, not sure how God will use us, feels like walking into darkness. So does taking that initial step of faith when we first pray, as if God's really listening. It feels like a step in the dark. Our faith grows when we realize He listens. Our faith grows when we see that He empowers us to meet the needs of others, perhaps in a small way at first. And then once we've tested it and we have courage to try another step, our confidence that God will show up grows. So what opportunities are there to develop an active faith? Well, at FBC, we can help you grow your faith by helping you find your place in one of our serving teams. Check out FBC Next and click on Find Your Team if you want to try something new like our community group or our kids and youth team. There are small groups to join if you want more intentional community. Simply inviting a friend or a colleague or a neighbour to give church a try and praying about it is a step of faith. Of course, it doesn't need to be through FBC. There are loads of places to volunteer locally as a way of living out active faith, including the Link Visiting Scheme, local schools, Soulscape, who work with teenagers, Cowshed, helping people in crisis, and local food banks. Find a place to get stuck in based on what you're passionate about or where you notice a need. Grow your own faith. Expect God to work in you and through you as you take that step of faith. It may seem dark at first. You may be unsure how it will work out. But expect the light to come on as you see how God works through you to help other people. Jesus could easily have fed those people by himself. He didn't need the packed lunch or the disciples. But he made them part of his plans. They gave what they could. They brought what they had, and God multiplied it. The result was that people were fed, but more than that, everyone's faith was fueled. God doesn't need you or me to help him, but he wants us to help him because it helps us when we help him help others. Putting your faith into action may take you to the laundrette, the hungry crowd, the lonely senior, or the anxious teenager. It may mean doing things you never thought you could do. It will mean you have to rely on God more than ever before, and it will grow your faith. You'll realize what a privilege it is to have been there when God showed up and you got to help.